All right, hello, Honors 410. Today, I know we're right on the brink of looking at our workshop process. One thread of the discussion that I want to open up below is just sort of thinking about feedback. And to define that term a little bit more, I'm talking about kind of input that someone receives from someone about kind of a job that they've done or about work they're doing. This can be in an academic setting, this can be in a work setting, this can even be in a personal setting, within a friendship, within any other kind of relationship, when someone kind of gives kind of, a sense of like how you did on something, whether it's, positive, negative, in between. And so I want to, kind of put you in that mindset, because obviously this workshop process is kind of all about feedback, specifically around writing. But I think a lot of the central tenets of how we give and receive feedback in other aspects of life are quite transferable to this process. So what I challenge you to think about is times when you've received feedback and when it was useful and when it was not useful, and kind of what made that difference there, right? So I'll give just one example that's not academic in nature, just to give you a little bit more framework for kind of what I'm talking about here. So the very first paid job that I ever had was working at a clothing store. And so I'll always remember there was one time when they asked whatever I was like 16-year-old Mike at the time to vacuum the store at the end of the night. And to be transparent, I had never used a vacuum cleaner before. And so I did my best, and it was fairly intuitive how to use the vacuum. So I made my way around the store and vacuumed it all. And then when we were closing up an hour later, I looked at the notes the assistant manager had left for the manager to look at the next day. And the note said, never have Mike vacuum the store. And the feedback was he takes forever and he doesn't even do a good job of it. And I was like, this is the least useful form of feedback I've ever encountered, just because it hurt my feelings a little bit, but also just because you didn't talk to me directly about this. And it's just kind of mean, right? Had it been sort of more of like sit me down and be like, hey, I saw how you did that. Let me show you a few things. Let me tell you how I would go about doing this task. I was like, that probably would have been more helpful. That would have been, better feedback, or at least better delivery of that feedback. So that's what I'm kind of challenging you to think about is, again, just feedback experiences you've had in your life. Again, it could be academically, it can be at work, it could be if you're on a sports team, it could be within your family, with your friends, however you kind of can process that, just to think about, again, what makes feedback useful, what does not. And we'll start, just kind of have that in the background when we start thinking about our own feedback process in the workshop. Otherwise, though, for today's video lecture, I wanted to focus on the itch. So this is another story from the Anne McBee collection. One of the big overarching concepts I want to get out related to this piece is the idea of chronic versus acute tension. So within a story, I think probably if you've done any sort of study of creative writing before, you may have heard tension as kind of a buzzword. And I do think it's a vital part of a successful story to have some source of tension, something that's making it hard for one of the characters or maybe multiple characters, some challenge to overcome, something that's kind of pressing against kind of the goals of our character, something that's kind of a source of kind of some sort of anxiety or tension or pain or whatever it might be. So with chronic tension, I'm going to define the itch in this story as being very much of that ilk, that it's a chronic tension in this story. It's not like one big event that kind of hits. It's rather this ongoing thing in the background that's constantly making the story, or at least our main character, a little bit uncomfortable. And things like this can come in stories. So like, for example, a character being hungry, like they haven't eaten yet that day, like that can be a really good source of acute tension. If someone has to pee, and this might sound kind of silly, kind of vulgar, but it's one of those things where when you feel that sensation, everyone's had that sensation at some point or another, and when that's going on, like you can't quite concentrate on anything else, even if there's really big stuff happening right in front of you. And so kind of how that sort of impacts a character and kind of how we experience a story. So it can be subtle, but also can be meaningful, can add to a sense of conflict in a story. So again, I think that the itching sensation very much does that in this piece. And that's a lesson I think we can all take for our own creative writing as well. But otherwise, I want to look at a few specific spots here. So on page 23, let's see, this is the first paragraph, about 5 lines down. Let's see, did I count that right? Oh yeah, here it is. So actually we'll start 4 lines down, we'll go into that. So like she did so often late at night, waiting for car horns and her neighbor's raucous lovemaking to lull her to sleep, Becca ran through the events of the day in her mind. And I'll cut off there. So that she is waiting for, again, for the car horns and the neighbors' lovemaking to quiet down. That these are the observations and her choices kind of review her day mentally. I'm just curious, as like this early on in the story, what that kind of tells us about this character, what that reveals, what it sort of sets up for us for the story as it moves forward from that point. Skipping ahead to page 25 here, I want to look at the last couple sentences of that middle paragraph there. So it reads, but Becca felt her sister was choosing to be the final copy, spit from a Xerox machine that was nearly out of ink, faded and unreadable. This kind of comparison of comparing her to like the last Xerox made by a copy machine. I'm just curious, what does that actually mean? How do we read into that? How do we interpret that as a way of describing a character? Carrying forward from that, I want to skip ahead to 29. So we start to get this repetition thing that first kind of keys in here, where we're getting literally the same text over again. I know if you're like me, I remember the very first time that I read this story, my thought was, like, did I just like stop paying attention in a moment? Am I rereading the same part accidentally over again? And then once I realized, no, it's not me, like I didn't make that mistake this time, I very quickly switched gears to like, is the book misprinted? Is this an error, right? Before I kind of figured out what was going on here. And so I wanted to sort of just ask you all, what is going on here? What is your interpretation of this? And what was your experience like when you were reading this for the first time? And so going on to 31 into 32 here, we have this this moment here of the dialogue, and what Becca is saying actually is changing, right? So we have that kind of pure repetition earlier on there. What Becca says, her input into the situation does change, but what the people around her are saying and doing does not change. And I'm just curious of what we think that sort of represents, what that might mean in this moment here. And so just to address some broader pieces, and this is going to overlap with some of what I've asked you already in the video, but going back to the idea of chronic tension and of the itch, I would suggest that this speaks a little bit to a broader chronic tension of the family life that's being portrayed here, of things kind of repeating themselves in certain cycles, even when there are attempts to kind of break free from that. But I'll kind of leave it at that, because I want to leave room for you all to kind of unpack things as well and interpret them as you will. So, okay, thank you as always for watching the video here, and I'll look forward to all you have to say.